My name is Dorothea Schiebel. I'm from Documentary Campus, and I would really like to welcome you all to this session, I Do It My Way. And I would like to thank Ruth Berry, who produced this session for us. And a big thank you to Dawn Porter, Ian Duncan, and Kral for being here with us in Sheffield and sharing their stories with us. Also, I would also like to invite you to our Documentary Campus drinks right after this session. They take place at 4 o'clock in Cutler's Hall, so you're all invited to join us after this panel. But now the floor is all yours.
Hello, everybody. It's really good to see you, and thank you for coming along, as Dorothea said. And you've done half my job, which was introducing the panel. But the way we're going to do this is we'll just do an introduction first, and then it's going to be one director after the other telling us how they do it their way. Okay, so on my right, I have Dawn Porter from Trilogy Films in the US. I have Ian Duncan from Windfall Films in the UK, and I have Kral from Kral Film Production, Argentina via Munich. So I'm going to start with Dawn, and you guys get off the stage.
Good luck, Dawn.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll wait until the guys sit down. Dawn. How did you get into, well, how did you become a director?
So my background is I'm a lawyer by training. I went to Georgetown Law School. I practiced law in the U.S. at a firm for 5 years. And a partner that I worked for went to work for ABC News in New York and said, do you want to come with me? And so I did. I went first in-house as a lawyer, and then I did a project for the news division at ABC, and I got hired to be the director of news standards and practices, which is a journalism job. And I was working with producers and writers. The way that we were doing the long-form news stories, I was working with, is the journalism good? And so reading sources and evaluate. I spent a lot of time in edit rooms. I read a lot of news scripts. And then I did that for almost 8 years. I know you're all wondering how old I am. I was a child prodigy. And then I went to A&E television. I did very much the same job, but A&E, it was longer form. It was usually, in the news division, it was 8 to 12-minute pieces, and occasionally an hour special or an investigative report where I would kind of kick all the tires with the producers. And then at A&E, it was longer form hours, television hours. And at A&E, I saw the people, Ryan Harrington, who's here, who now works for Discovery Channel, was there, and Molly Thompson, and they were doing feature docs. And I was like, oh, that's what I want to do. It's just taken me a long while to get there. But the problem I had was I was now at too senior a level in a corporation to get hired to direct a film. And so I thought, well, I'm just going to have to hire myself. So I started going around to film conferences, and actually one of the first ones I came to was Sheffield. And I went to conferences like this, and I just kind of jumped in and I spent 2 years going to conferences, meeting people, thinking about an idea until I was ready and I had my own pitch. And then I also learned a lot about film funding and financing. And so while I had my day job at A&E, I was applying for grants. And when I finally got a grant, then I left my job. And I made a film called Gideon's Army. It's about young public defenders working in the Deep South. And it was bought by HBO, premiered at Sundance, won a prize. And so now I work full-time as a documentary director.
So the reason why I'm asking this question to everyone is just how diverse all of our backgrounds are, and that we didn't necessarily go to film school. We've got a lot of experience on the road, so to speak. So Dawn, I'm going to hand over to you.
Sure.
To give us your words of wisdom.
Such as they are. I guess I would very much welcome your questions and thoughts as we go. So if something is interesting to you. So I want to start, so I didn't go to film school. And I really feel like my time spent with the journalists at ABC in particular, but also watching at A&E when we would get work from independent production companies, if there was anything controversial, it was my job to watch all of them and to kind of go back and forth with the producers on their fact-checking process. You start to see very quickly, and particularly this is from my training at ABC, the most important thing is character and pacing of a story. You know, a great character that's like drones on and on will kill a piece, and, you know, bad characters are kind of full stop. So I feel like the time spent in edit rooms, and there's something very, very beautiful about watching someone who's really skilled at their job take a very complicated subject and kind of whittle it down so it's comprehensible. And to do that, whether it's a 3-minute piece for the nightly news or an hour and a half, it was very similar skill set, and I really was interested in that. So I feel like that was kind of a lot of my film school. And you know, one of the other things I really learned was very few people are good at everything. And so I felt like it was really smart to surround myself with people who knew things that I didn't know, like everything. So, you know, I hired a camera person for my first shoot. And so, you know, if you think about it, I, for years, had producers calling me from the field saying, so-and-so won't talk. And what do I do? And I'd be like, you go get them to talk, you know, and I was constantly saying this. And then I was in the field and so wouldn't talk. And I was like, this is really stressful. But you know, all those years of kind of problem solving with producers and directors, you know, I drew on all of that skill. Then I'm a lawyer, so I drew on, you know, I was a litigator. My job was to tell a compelling story, often about not so nice people.
You know, you have signed the release form. You have no choice but to talk.
So, you know, so I kind of drew on that storytelling. And then my father was a commercial photographer. And when I was little, we used to make Super 8 films, like all the time. And so around my whole house, I've always been like a visual person. And I felt like with documentary verite, the kind of style that I am drawn to, it gathers all of what I'm good at together. And so I love it. So now I've done 2 feature length. I'm starting a third. My second film also premiered at Sundance. It's going to be on PBS in 2 weeks. It's about abortion clinics in the Deep South. And with each of them, I embedded with the characters and spent a long time, kind of observational documentary style. I don't know if any of you went to see Penny Baker and Chris Hedges speak, but a lot of what they said really resonated with me. I think I love watching people, and I feel like you can learn a lot about yourself and about people's motivations by just spending time with them. And then that's kind of our job is, if you're telling somebody else's story, you're attracted to it for a reason, and you always want to think about why you're putting this story together. And so what is your obligation to your subjects who are giving you the great privilege of living with them, but also what's your obligation to the story? You know, is what you're filming really critical to the story? So I wonder how many of you would say you're directors here? How many of you think you're gonna be a director? Almost everybody. Like, high hands. I'm a filmmaker. Say it loud. Be proud. You can say it. Are you not a filmmaker? Yeah, okay, thank you. You know, I think that's one of the first things. And how many of you have never made a film before? But you're in the, thank you, proud person who's never made a film. When you haven't made a film before, the whole process can seem opaque, intimidating, and a little bit absurd. And that's because it is. And so a lot of the skills that I think you start out, when you start out, you should feel confident in what you're good at and what you know. You may know your subject better than anybody else, even if you have not. So don't be afraid. I spent a lot of time asking people questions and not pretending that I knew something. I've now made many, many hours. I've been hired to do films. I did a project for Discovery Channel where I interviewed the President of the United States. I do not know camera settings, and I don't pretend that I know camera settings. I know what I like it to look like, but I've just never mastered like the ISO and all the rest of it. So, you know, don't feel bad about that. Like, you're not supposed to be a utility knife where you can do everything, unless you want to be a utility knife. Celebrate what your skills are and learn what you are drawn to, and then you have to put together the right team of people. And so I really actually enjoy doing that. Like, I don't edit either, which I find very frustrating because sometimes there's like something in my head and my fingers don't know how to make it come out. But what that makes you do is articulate your vision. You have to explain to somebody what you're looking for. And I think that makes you a better director. So what are you curious about? Yeah,
I'm
Ruth,
curious
what are you
to
curious
see
about?
some of your clips.
Oh, clips, yes.
It's a visual medium.
It's a visual medium. So I think what I'm going to show you, why don't I, you play the first clip? Yeah. Okay, so this is a trailer from Gideon's Army, my first film. So Gideon's Army is a film about 3 young public defenders working in the Deep South, and I met them. I had a friend at the Ford Foundation, and I had pitched her another project, which she rejected swiftly. But she did say, which was quite a gift, she said, well, what are you interested in? These are the topics that we're working on. She was in the justice group. And I said, well, I'm really interested in those public defenders. And so this was a conversation that happened over the course of time. I mean, it wasn't like I went in and I met them and I got a grant the next day. It probably took a year from first meeting to several more meetings, and I refined my idea, got in to see her a few times. But eventually she actually introduced me. She said, well, look at our grantees, and she kind of connected us, and then we just took it from there. And being a lawyer, I thought, I really think that I understand something about being a lawyer, and I think I can I understand the stress of this job, but I wasn't a public defender. I hadn't actually done their jobs. So the kind of driving question in making this film was, why does anyone want to do this job? They're not well paid. Their clients are sometimes terrible people. Their parents, nobody respects public defenders. They think they're terrible. And yet person after person that I met kept saying, I love this job. And I thought, that is just so, I didn't know any lawyers who loved their jobs. Every lawyer I knew was like running, screaming to get out. So
And join the film industry.
Not join but to do something where they were connected to people. And so what emerged was this portrait. And so the characters that I ended up selecting, they're each unique and they have their own, life story. But the kind of overarching thing in my mind was, if you put them together, you kind of have the ultimate, public defender. So they each really emphasized a character trait that I saw over and over. And so I think sometimes people have the misimpression that you're just pointing a camera and you get what you get. And that's not directing. That's taking a picture. Directing is you have something you want to say, and you've picked characters that are going to help you and them say it. And then how you construct that story arc is the ultimate expression of, hopefully, of your vision. And that's why you've got to cast your team really wisely. Like Matt Hamachek edited this film, and Matt had a lot of verite experience. He had worked with Marshall Curry, who's gotten 2 Academy Awards. But what was really Matt, so he's a really skilled editor, but what I really loved about working with Matt was our backgrounds were completely different. He was not a lawyer. So a lot of times I realized I was using shorthand that a regular viewer wouldn't know. And we were somewhat attracted to different things, which you would think could bring tension, but it actually, I think, brought a fuller picture because he kept asking questions. And so our process was, I would go out, I'd shoot, come back, we'd look at a bunch of footage together, and then I'd leave him alone, and see, I knew what I wanted to pull out, and he'd kind of get his little, but that was a way, I think you really also have to respect every member of your team. Pick your people wisely, but then respect them and let them do their jobs. So.
I know people haven't seen the whole film, but I'd like to ask you a couple of questions about it. So first of all, I noticed you got your funding or your finance from
Ford.
Yep. Okay. So can I ask you the budget?
Mm-hmm. It started out at like $375, and that was because I didn't know what I was doing. And then over time it grew to just over $1 million. And, you know, part of that was, frankly, it was overshot because I didn't know what I was doing. But part of that was you start to gather allies. And Ford put a lot of money in, and then we sold it to HBO, and they put more money in. And, you know, it's over 3 years. And as I said before, I don't have any marketable skills in documentary. I can't shoot, edit, or do anything else useful. So I had to hire people. So, you know, that does make your budget go up, especially when you're shooting immersively. So we have something like 500 hours of footage for the film. So the budget grew. Most of it, more than half was by grants, and then HBO was the rest.
Okay, now you're a producer and director, and now I want to ask a question like, who produces and directs out there? Okay.
Both of you guys.
What's that?
Both your directors. So,
Yeah.
no accident.
Yeah. So let's have a little chat about producing, directing, and the tensions between that, because I find it very difficult to work with a producer now. You know, I have done for years, and
You know, I think producing is an incredibly important skill set. And, you know, the first thing is, like, what do people mean by producing? There's different kinds of producers. So I worked with Julie Goldman here, who's a very experienced documentary producer. And Julie had a ton of things that I didn't have. She had worked with HBO for a long time. She had raised money. She had been on the distribution side. So now on the other hand, I had been in like cable. I knew the industry very well. I knew about financing. But so I think as my first experience on a big film and working with a producer, you know, we had to learn a lot, and I really kind of deferred a lot to her. But really what she was doing was getting a lot of the troubles out of the way so that I could actually work with an editor. You know, it was very hard. I'm a lawyer. I'm a business person. I was grown up. It was hard to let go. And I had been working on the film, I should also say, 1.5 years before she came on. So I felt like I knew everything. It was hard to not try and do everything. But if you can find somebody who you're simpatico with, there's no better collaboration. And I think that there's more of a trend of people like Julie who call themselves creative producers. So they certainly have ideas about your content. And I think particularly when you're starting out, it's important to let that information in, but then figure out what you're going to do with it. Because in the end, you will see, you will travel with this film forever. And if you cave on something that's really important to you, no one knows that it was XYZ. I'm not saying this Julie, but like there's all kinds of cooks in the kitchen who have helpful hints. And in the end, it's usually your name on that movie. So if you can't defend or feel great about every second of it, you have to revisit and explain to people what you're upset about, because it is your name. And each bit of work that you do raises your profile. How are we doing with the...
yeah, let's watch some more pictures.
Yeah. So I'm going to show you this. The second one is Brandy and DeMontes. Let's see if I can get their whole heads on the screen. So actually, the critical thing about that scene is the mother. That's his mother. And the look on her face when her son, who is facing 15 years to life in prison, no parole, says he doesn't have any questions about what's about to happen to him. And there's so much that goes on there where she's, you know, she's kind of, you feel like she's thinking, did I fail as a mother? Not because he's arrested, but because he doesn't seem invested. He doesn't even know what to ask. And that's her failing. And I think that is, but what I really love about this clip in particular is, so I've shot with the same 2 cameramen, and they were both men, for almost the whole film, over 3.5 years. And they got to know me and my subjects really, really well. And this scene, the other cameraman and I were down the hall, and we were doing something else. And this was Patrick, who was our sound guy, but he also does second camera. And he knew our subjects well enough, so when this started to unfold, he just kept rolling. And he also did, you can't quite see it there, but he does this beautiful rack shot from the boy to his mother. And like, if you are communicating with your crew, they can do, you don't tell them, shoot this, shoot that. You explain what you're going for, which is, this is a personal story. They got very quickly, I like a lot of close-ups, like a lot of intimate times, and then you just let them work. You know, if there's something you're dying to get, you should direct your camera person to get it. But otherwise, I really love like working with people whose eye and talent I respect and letting them work and seeing what you get. So that's what I love about that scene.
Any questions about access, about over here? Just a moment. You have to wait until a microphone comes.
And maybe you could fuss with so we could get the whole.
Hello?
But I had them on my computer. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry.
You mentioned about your crew, and I would like to hear more about how many people you have with you and how mobile you are, or not mobile, able to follow people in this type of filmmaking.
Yep. So for Gideon's Army, it was often only me and one camera, and if we were lucky and happened to have money, you know, we say we had that big budget. A lot of it didn't come till later, and like the first year, sometimes I could either afford camera or sound. So guess what I picked? So often just me, camera, and sound. That's really what I like the best, to tell you the truth. If we're doing a sit-down interview, you might have, like, it's nice to hire a grip who can do lights, but that's mostly for time. I recently did a reel that was for Showtime, and we had like a big bunch of people, and I can do that, but it's very hard to make your subjects forget about the cameras when you have 10 people in a room. And the kinds of stories that I'm interested in telling are often very personal. They have to trust me, and I really like it if I'm not shooting. I do second camera a lot, but I like it if I can not do second camera, because if you think about it, you want to get it to the point where you're having a conversation with someone, and if you're behind a camera, it's really hard. You can't look somebody in the eye, you can't react, you know. As I've gotten more comfortable with interviewing, much less, I'll tell you, like, actually one of my favorite stories, one of my early interviews, when the main character in Gideon's Army, and we were in a hotel room, and we didn't have any money, so like he took the shade off the light and put a sheet kind of in front to like make the lighting. That was our big sophisticated lighting setup. But what happened is the camera guy, Chris, ended up making it really intimate. It was almost like being in a confessional. And she starts to tell this story about how her client threatened to murder her. And I don't know if we would have gotten that if we weren't just, you know, I knew her, we were sitting there talking. And then the other thing that happened was, because I wasn't a very experienced interviewer at that point, and your normal inclination is someone tells you something, you reach out to them or you comfort them. And what my camera guy knew that I didn't know at the time was, you can't do that to somebody because you'll break the moment. So the thing you want to film prevents you from being a human being sometimes. So you have to learn to communicate that the fact that you are not doing what a normal human being should do, which is to say, oh my God, I'm so sorry, is only because you respect their story and you want it to come out. So sometimes now I tell people, you know, if you get upset, don't keep going, do your best, and I'll nod, but you keep going, you know. There, I started to lean, she starts telling this and she starts really crying, and I started to lean into her, and my camera guy goes like this, and it was basically like, stay in the moment, stay with it. And it's one of the hardest things to do as a verite filmmaker, is to stay when something really difficult is unfolding. And so your subjects have to know you well enough to know that you're not an asshole, that this is important. But it's a hard thing to kind of learn.
Dawn, we were on a panel about diversity this morning. How diverse was your crew?
They were very diverse. They were white men.
Yeah, so
And-
I was interested in that
Yeah.
because, I mean, there's a lot of not white men
Yeah,
in
well,
your film. So,
but you know what they were? They were Southern, and I was Northern. And so, working in the American South, they definitely had a language with the other characters because they were Southern that I did not have. And they also, because they weren't fancy pants New York City camera people, they were from Alabama, they knew a lot of these struggles really intimately, and so they were really the right people. Diversity is bigger than now. I did a film about abortion clinics, and I worked with a lot of female camera people, but not always. Some men. Nadia is Latina. I work with a Latina editor a lot, and I really love. She also comes from not a very wealthy background, and she points out stuff all the time that I think if you didn't grow up really poor, you might miss, like how people are recycling things to use, or I like kind of mixing it up.
Would you work with the same cinematographer all the time, or do you like to change the crew depending upon the story?
I tend to work with the same people, mostly because I trust them. You can, I don't know if you've seen the movie Five Broken Cameras. It's not great cinematography, riveting film, right? Like, you could even say sometimes the cinematography sucks. And it's the most watchable movie because of the subject matter. So you can have a great cinematographer with no soul. And I don't think that serves your picture. So I kind of look for people who are going to connect and respect my characters the most. All of them have to be basically good. But then the real thing is, like, what are they going to be like when the shit hits the fan? Mm-hmm. Because it's going to. If you're in an abortion clinic, are they going to freak out if we get threatened, which we did? We went to prison a lot. Are they going to, I had a sound guy, like, totally melt down. So you have to, and then the other thing is, a lot of people I end up making films about are very vulnerable people. And I don't want them to feel like zoo characters. They need to feel like we are in it with them. And so everybody I work with, I think, shares that empathetic quality, where they understand somebody's going through something and they're respectful. So what I love a lot about that clip, including the best use of Black Lives Matter ever. But what I wanted to say about that was, that Dr. Parker is a physician who lived at the time in the North, and he would fly south to do abortions because there were no abortion doctors there's one abortion clinic in the entire state of Mississippi. There's 6 states in America that have only one clinic, and there's very few doctors. So he flies to different clinics, and he gets harassed. But over 2.5, almost 3 years of filming with him, you get very close to the people you're filming with. And I realized I stopped asking him about safety because it was too hard for me. Like, I couldn't handle the idea that he was actually really in danger. And so it was like on the very last day of filming, I was like, I haven't asked you this in 1.5 years. And at the beginning of it, he says that he doesn't wear a vest. And then he starts saying very calmly and slowly, because then this time it was reversed. I started crying, interviewing this person I love. You love your subjects, you really do. And he very slowly and compassionately explains that he's going to keep doing this work and he's not going to wear a vest, and that he doesn't dwell on it because maybe he would not be so brave. So then we cut that audio, which was from a separate interview with him going into the clinic, going into the war zone. And so I really, really love that juxtaposition of, now only and I know, but that there was this really intense kind of personal, he has to have this conversation a lot about why he risks his life to do this. So anyway.
Thank you so much, Dawn. No. Thank you. Thanks. So Dawn is doing Verite. Kirman is from doing different films. here's a far more, well, you're going to talk about your own films. I want to know, first of all, how you got into our industry. And boy, you've got a messy desktop there.
Yes. I don't have
Mine's
time
worse.
to put it in order. I
Mine's
want to do it
worse.
since 2 years or 3 years. I promise I will do it in
Don't
next
worry.
time. Yeah.
Mine's worse.
I was born in Buenos Aires, and when I was studying ethnology, and when I was 18 or 19, I came across some films by Tarkovsky, a Russian director, and by Wim Wenders, a German director, and I loved their films, and those were the directors who gave me the courage to decide to become myself a film director. So I went to study at the Munich Film School because that was the place where Wim Wenders studied, and I wanted to become Wim Wenders. I didn't manage, but I tried. So, and what happened was that maybe I will tell how I came in contact with documentaries. I studied fiction at the Munich Film School, and back then there were 3 departments. There were the fiction students, that was my department, and we were talking the whole day about films and eventually about women. And then there were the producers who were talking about money and about success. And then there were the students of documentary who were not talking at all. They were smoking and watching the world, feeling that they know everything. So, and I remember because in Argentina there is not a tradition, or there was not a tradition with documentary. So the first documentaries I saw, I hated them. They were boring, they were in black and white, and they were badly shot. And I loved black and white, but I didn't like badly shot films. So what happened was that a couple of years later, Wim Wenders came to the school and was our teacher. He was the teacher of my class, and we did a film with him. And this film was a mix between fiction and documentary. It was a film about the German inventor of the projector in 1890-something. At the same time, with the Lumières, there were people in Germany who were trying to invent the projector. And we did a film which was part in fiction and part documentary with the granddaughter of this German inventor. And that was the first time when I came across what it meant to make documentaries. So this very direct way of shooting, and I liked it. And what happened was that I was trying to make my diploma film. It was a fiction film, but it didn't go forward. The script was a mess, and I it wasn't working. So I did a step back, and I decided to do a film about my own family.
I'd say that was a step forward.
Well, that's true. Maybe it was. Yeah, I don't know. I suppose. Yeah.
I think documentary is harder than fiction. That's all.
You think that documentary is
Harder than fiction.
Well, everything has two sides, you know.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't know what's the boundary. Where is the boundary between documentary and fiction? But that's another issue. And I did a film about my father. I didn't see my father for many years, and I went back to Buenos Aires and I interviewed my father and my mother, and I asked them how they met and what they liked about them. And I asked also my father why he wasn't with me so many years, and I realized preparing this panel that my films taught me a lot of lessons, you know, and the lessons that this film taught me was that if you care for the theme of the film that you are doing and you're interested in it, then this careness, if you can say that like this, will stick within the film until the very end, and that the audience, if you care for it, then will also care for this film. And I did this film, and it took me 2 or 3 years, and then I won the first prize in Yamagata. And it was aired on TV, and it was for me a very important film. And then I also learned with this film that that you don't need to be too worried about form, that you will find the form while you are making the film. At least that was what happened to me. And that the film will find its way to be made, so to speak, and the film will bring you to the form it needs. At least that was my experience. I will show you a small clip.
So you're mainly doing cinema films,
Yes, I did since I had my...
theatrical releases. Yeah.
Sorry?
So you go for a theatrical release.
Well, that's what I
first,
tried.
yeah.
Since my diploma film, the film
And
about...
Dawn, you're making feature docs that might happen to go on television. Okay, so this is a very important, I guess, distinction about where we're coming from as directors. Sorry, you're going to show your...
Yes, and there was also one important thing that this film taught me, and it was if you are making a personal film, then it has to be really personal. You cannot stay in between. For me, it took me 2 years of editing to accept that I had to put the question of the film, which was, why did you abandon me?
Yeah.
You know, and it was very difficult for me to make it, so to speak, to put it in a film because it was the question of my life. But then I understood that if I didn't put this question in the film wouldn't have its real power, and that this question was not only my question, but also the question of a lot of people who would look at the film. You know?
And also the huge risk of asking the question and not having it answered. Because I think there is which tells another story in itself, but
Well,
you don't know until you're there. But anyway, clip, and I'll be quiet.
Clip.
Pictures.
Wait a minute. 1-7.
Yep.
Well, we could go for 40
Does
minutes.
anybody have any questions? What? Right now? No? Okay, Human.
There's any question there?
There was voiceover of you, obviously, in those clips. At some point, do you appear in the film with your father? That comes later.
Yes.
And when, sort of, how did you make the decision to do that? Was that at the point you realised you needed to have that as the main question, or how did that come about?
The story of the film is the filmmaker, myself, going to Buenos Aires to meet his parents and to ask them what happened, so more or less. And I am in the picture. Sometimes I'm talking with my father or talking to my mother, and that proved to be a good idea to put the filmmaker into the story, so to speak. Did I answer your question? That was a question.
How did you actually broach the subject with them? Did you ring them up and say, "Hey, I want to do a film about why you guys broke up"? And I mean, what did you say to them?
No, of course not. I just started shooting it, and I didn't know exactly where I was going. I didn't know. I didn't know at all which form the film would have at the end. I didn't know it. I just felt that I had to do this film.
But you knew the question. The question in you was, I want to find out why.
Well,
so you know that, and then did they feel deceived or anything? I mean, I'm just wondering how
those were the
your problems in making that.
Those were the questions of my life and still are. So I knew them by heart. Of course.
Sorry, what I'm saying is, did they, when they realised these questions are coming, yeah? Was it this process so that it was like not a surprise to them, or did you ask these questions and then they were a little bit taken aback? I mean, how did you? I know I couldn't have done it with my parents. Okay, I could never have done that. They would have just said, "No, we're not talking about anything.
I see.
We don't like going on camera. Blah blah blah."
Of course. No, my parents were open to talk about everything.
Yeah,
and
okay.
I think that 30 seconds later, my father stands up and says, "I don't feel well. I have to go now."
Yeah.
it happened, but still, next days I went back.
What did they think of the final film? Was your mother angry that your father was talking about the police? I mean, did it bring up old wounds? Like, how did they handle it?
My mother said my father is still a liar.
Yeah.
and my father said, you edited this film in a way that the truth doesn't come across.
Yeah, that means it was a good film. Both of them hated it. Good. So, okay.
A couple of years later, there were a couple of producers in Germany, and they wanted to make a film as a kind of sequel of Buena Vista Social Club. One of these producers was the owner of music rights in Cuba, and they thought it's the good possibility to make a new film in Cuba. So they talked to Wenders, and Wenders had been my teacher at film school, and Wenders is a very clever director. He didn't need to repeat himself, so he said, okay, if I do the film as a director, he could stay in the project as an executive producer. And for me, it was a huge possibility, so I was happy and said, of course, yes. And the idea with which we started the film was that we would have the old singers and musicians from Buena Vista, and that they would bring us to their, their sons in a music point of view. But so we started. But then what happened was that the old musicians from Buena Vista had contracts with the producer of Buena Vista, who was not our producer, and they wouldn't even take photographs with us. So that was very difficult, because it was as if you want to make the Weiße Hai, the white shark, but then when you are about to shoot it, they say to you, you don't have the white shark, you have a small fish, you know. So what we did, because we wanted to make the film, was we invented a story of a taxi driver in Cuba who befriends one of the old musicians from Buena Vista who didn't have a contract. And they become friends, and they try to put together a band with the best young musicians in Cuba to go abroad. So we managed to make the film, but it never felt real. And this problem stayed until the very end, so to speak. And for me, it was a very, very important lesson in the way that the spirit in which a film is born will stick also to its very end. And if this spirit, and that's very subjective, of course, but that was my experience, if this spirit is only to make money, and you don't quite get to the truth of what you are telling, then probably the film will not work, because you are not telling anything worth to be told. So what I learned is, next film is, stay with the truth and look for the truth. I will show you a short clip of it.
A question for me. When we start getting involved in a film, and perhaps we already foresee it may not be going to work. I mean, there's a great pressure to go forward. So did you learn from that, I will never go forward again when it feels wrong? And how do you pull out because I mean there are expectations upon you?
Yeah, of course. Oh, listen, it always feels wrong when you're making a film, because you never know exactly what is going to get out of this mess. I mean, and while you are shooting, everything is so complicated. You know? I mean, at least when I shoot, I never know exactly how the film will look like, yeah, and if it will work or not. But I'm saying, if I could be in the same position again, I would of course try to make the film, because that's what my work, to make films. But I would put more time in searching for the characters, for the right characters. I would fight more for this, and I would, I think, try to come across a story which is truthful. Can you say it like this? Which is not only invented, but who has truth in it. Because if not, what happens is that it doesn't feel real. I think it's some of the feeling that you all had with this small clip. Yeah?
I'm going to ask a question right off the beam at the moment. Do you actually make a good living as a filmmaker? I mean, can you pay the rent? Do you have your own apartment?
I have only debts at this time. My last film was sold in 38 countries. I'm a co-producer of the film, and I only have debts.
Debts?
Debts. How to say debts?
Debts, yeah.
Yeah.
You owe money.
Yes, right.
Okay. Does anybody have the same position out there? Your directors who don't actually earn a good living out of making films, and you're wondering how? Just be honest. No, you all do well. Gee. Second job, yeah. Oh, yeah. Whose second job is it? Maybe there's more people. Yeah. No, you're all. Aren't you clever? I think it's very hard living to make.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely.
Sorry, do you want to we'll just get a microphone. Hold on. No, it's being recorded, so they...
I don't know what our debt is to the government, but it's a lot of money. £60,000, I reckon. I don't know. I've never really thought about it. There's no point.
Do you have to pay it back?
Yeah.
Oh.
If we earn enough money. We're at university in London. Well, we're not anymore, but we were. And yeah, it's best not to think about it, because if you thought about it, you wouldn't do it. So, and you want to do it. So.
Yeah, I think we agree with that. Well, when you get finance from the government, you have to pay it back. And where are your budgets coming from?
It's a mix between state funding from Germany, TV, and state funding from Argentina, and private equity.
So let's move on to your film that will be shown.
Okay.
Here at the festival.
Okay.
And you're very happy with this film, I take it.
I'm happy how things went out. The film my last film is a film about the most famous tango couple of Argentina, and they are both in the same age of my parents. And it's interesting that I showed you the film about my parents, because the film I made I couldn't have made it if I hadn't done before the film about my parents. And this couple met when she was 14 and he was 17 in Buenos Aires at the end of the 40s. That was where the golden age of tango was, a golden age of tango. And they started to dance together, and they became friends, and they became lovers, and they married, and they hated each other, they loved each other, they hated each other, they separated, they came back together, but they never stopped dancing tango together for almost 50 years. Until one day he told her that she couldn't dance with him or in his company anymore. And she was 60-something at this point, and she had to find a way of living. And after they were the biggest tango couple in the world, and I did the film with the help of Documentary Master School. I developed the film within this workshop, and it took 4 years to be done. And I had very, very difficult moments, extremely difficult moments, when I thought that everything was. That there were no more way to go, that everything will crash, and me myself also with the film. But I was lucky, and always something happened that brought the film a little further. One day, the main protagonist, not the main protagonist, but he told us after he had signed a contract with us that he wouldn't be part of the film. That we could make a film about him, but without Maria, or about Maria, but without him. So that was terrible, because it is as you would like to do Romeo and Julia, and you don't have Romeo. But we kept working, we kept shooting, we shot the film from her perspective, and then a couple of months later, he come back to the project, and we shot with him, and then thanks God, the editing was invented, so we edited this together, and it worked very, very well. And the lesson this film taught me is that somewhere in heaven there are some gods, the gods of filmmakers. And if you keep working, but you have to work, you have to be very, how to say it? You have to
Diligent,
yeah, you have to work hard. And if you work hard, not at the very beginning, but some years later, if you keep working, they might see you and help you. That was really my feeling after everything that we went through with this film and how it came out.
Okay, let's see this clip. I'm mesmerised. We've got to stop at 4 o'clock. And I thought it was past. Ian, I am so sorry. 4:15. Oh, well, we're going till 4:15 now. And that's perfect timing. Thanks so much, Herman. And I'm really sorry I just pushed you off the stage there. Ian, you come from a completely different background, in a way. How did you get into filmmaking?
Well, I was a painter. Actually, I came out of art school and drifted into filmmaking, and did a postgraduate course at film school, at the art school, actually, the Royal College of Art Film School. And it was very much a kind of art film background. And I made a film, my graduation film, which was a drama, was bought by the BBC, and I got a job off the back of it. But I ended up in the science department, and I'm an arts graduate. I know nothing about science. So that's where I was for quite a while, making science films, and then I left and formed Windfall Films after 4 years, and we've been going for about 30 years. So that's my story, my background.
You're mainly doing television.
Yeah, I don't.
In a way, there's
It's quite. I'm so envious of you guys, to be honest, because I've often thought about making proper feature-length documentaries. And although I've made films that are 2 hours long, they're not destined for the cinema, so they tend to be TV shows. And, you know, I run a TV company, so we have to kind of churn the work out, to be honest. Not churn it out, it's the wrong way of putting it, but, we love what we do, but it's a kind of different model. So all the films I make are actually fully funded by broadcasters.
And let us, you've got a lot of great, in a way, things that you've brought out over the years that you've thought about from all of your years of directing. Yeah, sort of.
A bit like Herman. I've kind of learned things actually, as you can imagine, by doing this job. So I thought I'd pass on some of the lessons I've learned. The first thing is the value of not knowing too much. Now I don't know how many of you have made your first films. Anyone made their first film out there? Well, I would say that first film is incredibly special. Incredibly special, because you do things in that film that probably no one else does. Actually through naivety, perhaps, but that sets you apart from everyone else. And I've learned the value of that. So I'll tell you a little bit about a film I made. So I made quite a few science documentaries, and they did well, you know, when I was at the BBC and at Windfall at the beginning. And then I was asked to make a documentary that was personal to me by the BBC. Now, I'd never thought about making a film that was personal, not like these guys, perhaps, who are making films that mean so much to them. And I thought, and it took me a long time to come up with an idea. And I had a memory of something from school where I would walk to school and walk home from school. And I have very powerful memories of that, just that, walking to school and walking home. And I thought that maybe what I was doing when I was a boy had disappeared. I grew up in Yorkshire, in Keighley, not too far up the road. And I was living in London, and I was only seeing London, and I thought maybe what I was doing at school had gone. And then I made a film about kids walking to school and walking home. A very, very simple idea, and I discovered actually that it hadn't quite gone. The other kind of weird thing about this, it was a kind of verite documentary, an actuality documentary, which I'd never made before. And to be honest, I didn't know how to do it. So what you would normally do is you would follow the kids to school and follow the kids home. And if you got enough good material, you'd turn it into a film. Well, I didn't want to do that, and I had a very good reason for not wanting to do it. I had a kind of weird fixation about the static camera, the fixed shot, if you know what I mean. So a fixed camera shot, I'd set myself a kind of weird rule that I couldn't pan, I couldn't tilt, I couldn't track the camera, I couldn't zoom. Whoa, I couldn't zoom. Zooms were anathema. So I had this sort of weird thing that the camera always had to be static. So that ruled out the way of doing it as an actuality shoot. Now, lots of people have made films with static camera. I'm sure you've seen them. Charlie Chaplin, one of the greatest. I mean, the way he uses space, the way the timing of his shows, where he leaves a shot and then comes back just at the right moment. You know, so people have done this for eons, since the beginning of cinema. And there was a particular director that I was in awe of, a man called Bill Douglas. And if you don't do anything after my talk, please go and check this guy out. He's amazing. It's called Bill Douglas. He's a Scottish filmmaker. He made 4 films in his life. The first 3 he made are absolutely brilliant. And he used a static camera, and it had a very kind of emotional impact on me. And I met the great man once at a film festival, and I kind of plucked up the courage to go and ask him a question. And I said to him, "Mr. Douglas, could you tell me why you never move the camera?" And he said to me, "Because I don't know how to." And it was the most kind of, I don't know, and it chimed with me. And the funny thing about the Bill Douglas trilogy, as it's called, the first 2 films, the camera doesn't move. The third one, starts to pan, starts to tilt. There's even a tracking shot. And to be really honest, the magic went for me, bizarre as it sounds at that point. I mean, I didn't say that to the great man, but I did notice that. So anyway, I decided I was going to make a film where the camera doesn't move. So maybe we could run the first clip of playing out, please. I mean, I should say a little bit about how that was made. That was shot in film. It was like a long time ago. And ingrained in my brain is the price of film. It's very expensive. Yeah. 100 pounds per 10 minutes once it's actually processed. So you don't shoot film like you might, shoot tape. Anyway, the way that was shot was I went for a week with a sound recordist and recorded the kids walking home to and from school. I didn't shoot a frame of film. I just recorded their sync, their activities. And then I edited that, a bit like you would edit a radio film. And then we went and we got the kids out of school, which they loved. And I said, "I'm now going to shoot in stages your journey to school." And I would set the shot, get the shot right, and then I let them walk through it. And those were all the first takes of everything we did, because the kids are naturally very inventive. But the nice thing is, a lot of the sync in that is actually cheated. So the sync is actually from the previous walking along with them with the sound recordist, recording on tape, and then we managed to cheat the sound into the... I don't even know if this is a documentary, to be honest. But and actually nothing happens in it. You know what I mean? That's what happens for the whole film. They walk to school and they walk home. But it kind of took me back to a moment in time that I remembered as a kid, and I discovered that kids are the same as they always were, and they probably still are.
What year was that done? Well, film.
Sometime in the 90s. I'm sorry, I don't know.
Actually, I could see that as a virtual reality now.
Yes, well, probably, yeah, a kind of fixed frame. I mean, I mean, just a bit about sound. There's no music on that film. I decided not to use music. Again, because people like Bill Douglas didn't use music and had a certain power. I mean, these days, music is over everything, and it's a very useful tool. But to come back to my initial theme, I didn't really know what I was doing. A bit like you guys were saying earlier on, when you make a film, sometimes you don't know what you're doing, and sometimes that's a really good thing. And of course, now I've learned, now I've got older and I'm more experienced, I'm moving the camera all the bloody time. But that thing that thing that maybe that was different about that film, that could only work for that one film, I think. Actually, it didn't. I did another film like it too. But I finally got the static camera out of my system. I'm not sure I'm any better as a film director, by the way, but that's what happened.
Now we're going into when you start moving the camera?
Oh, no, not really. No, I suppose my other kind of thought, I feel a bit like a preacher. My other lesson for the day is...
you can always stand up.
But it's like, how do you tell big stories with not a lot of money? And when you work in television like I do, that's what you're doing all the time. And I think probably as young filmmakers, that's what you'll be doing too, I guess. You'll be...
Anyone do television here? Hey, television. There.
No, there's never enough money, is there? I mean, whatever the budget, there's never enough money. And I've done a lot of big budget films, and I've done a lot of small budget films. And in some ways, I would argue that sometimes the small budget films are kind of more interesting to do. You're forced into maybe being a bit more inventive. I know it's a bit of a cliche, that, but I happen to think it's true, that when you have to make those decisions, you can't do what you want to do because you don't have the money. You sometimes come up with better decisions. And I think the biggest decision a director makes when he makes a film actually is how you spend your money. I think it's the most important creative decision you make. Certainly in the way we make films, we have a budget, and that budget's not going to get any bigger. You can go over budget, but that's not a good idea anyway if you're running the company. So part of the skill, I think, of a director is thinking, how can I get the best value out of my money? And I was going to show you a clip from another film. It was a series that we did for National Geographic called Generals at War. And it's about generals of World War II making decisions in battles. So we featured big battles like the Battle of Stalingrad and El Alamein in the program. We did 6 1-hours. We had a limited budget. We had 120,000 thereabouts per show, 120,000 pounds per program. Sounds quite a lot, but in fact, not for what we were trying to do. So we had options. We could have, and the idea was we would use modern day generals to kind of put you inside the heads of these competing generals. So we could have gone to the battlefields as they are today and taken the generals with us and done some interviews in the battlefield, some pieces to camera. And if we're lucky, we might have got some kind of atmospheric visuals, maybe even a dramatic reconstruction to help tell the story. But what we decided to do instead was to spend all our money on one set and to set the whole series in that one set and bring the generals to the set. So I'll show you a clip. I mean, this is a National Geographic series about generals. We just run that clip, please. You probably not going to see graphics like that very much, but and they were born out of a lack of money, really. I mean, we built cardboard tanks and cardboard aeroplanes and cardboard soldiers, and then did some kind of clever animation on them, and that's how we provided the kind of visual content in that story. So I suppose what I've learned, really, I mean, you know, as I say, I've done big budget programs, but the bigger the budget, the more influence the broadcasters have over what you're doing. They want to get involved in it. I'm doing a big show at the moment, and you know, we have to go and see the broadcasters once a week and tell them what we're doing and what we're up to. But that show, because it was relatively low budget, we were left alone. We started out and we delivered the programs. I mean, we had to have rough cut viewings, but we sent them out to the States. We had them signed off, and it was a really brilliant thing. So low budget's good because I think sometimes it helps creativity.
Probably now, I mean, I don't know. I always think you're never as good as your last film. You know, like, I mean, it doesn't mean just because you've made a great film as an individual, you will get the gig next time, or you have to jump the hoops all the time. With your company, I'm sure you're not having to jump so often, but I'm interested in, you know, the way as directors we must lay it all out, script it, and then of course we go into the field and the script gets thrown out the window, and you know, we pretty much, and all I feel like we're doing is proving to somebody I can tell a story. And I think the most important thing is being in situations where the story changes and you have to make decisions on the ground.
Yeah.
And obviously you've been through
all
that
the time.
quite
I mean,
a lot.
that's basically what you do all the time. You're making it up as you go along. I mean, hearing Herman talking about how difficult films are to make, I mean, they are. They always are. You always think that you've learned from the last one, and then you find out you've learned nothing from the last one, or from the last 30 years of filmmaking in my case. So it is, every time you make a film, you encounter new problems that seem insurmountable. Every time. It's kind of weird. But I suppose if it was easy, then we'd no point doing it, I guess. I mean, the last clip I want to talk about, if that's all right.
Yeah.
I mean, as I say, I've been doing science documentaries, and as I said, I came out of an art school training. So I'm not a very good writer. And if you ever, I don't know if anyone makes science documentaries here. Okay, well, you know what I mean. Narration is very important in a science documentary. And when you're not a good writer, it can be difficult. So I was asked to make a film for Channel 4 about the oldest living thing, which happens to be a tree. And it lives in the White Mountains of California. It's a wizened old thing, but it's still living. It's been there for nearly 5,000 years. And I was really tickled by the idea of trying to make a film about a tree, because it's kind of perverse, interesting, difficult, quite a challenge. I mean, luckily this tree lived close to, when I say close, I mean a couple of hundred miles away from Las Vegas. So I knew that Las Vegas was a great place for a filmmaker to go and play with. But still, the idea of the film was that the tree would actually would tell its own story. So the tree would narrate its story, and it would talk about the life it's led for the last 5,000 years, and also talk about human beings. When human beings started, hunting around its roots some couple of thousand years ago. So human beings were in there. So it's a kind of history story. There's going to be a lot of science in it. I wasn't going to use many talking heads, partly because it was a kind of documentary thing, and I've always been a bit uncomfortable about the straight documentary. So what I did was I talked to a poet, a really good poet, a British poet called Roger McGough from Liverpool. And I'd worked with Roger before in another science film about chemistry, and he was great to work with. So we collaborated on it. And I suppose all I'm trying to say really was one of the things I learned very early as a director is know your limitations. And my limitations were in words, writing. I can write okay now, but it took me a long time to learn. So I worked with Roger. So I'll run this clip. This is Roger McGough being the tree, the Methuselah tree.
We've got 2 minutes to go. Does anybody have a question that will take us to the end? Okay, very quickly, does anyone have a one-liner for our group? Oh, could we just have the microphone, please? Thank you.
So do you still feel like a poet?
Oh, I've never been a poet. I mean...
An artist, I'm sorry.
An artist. Not enough.
I mean, that's beautifully, all of them are you see a vision. Do you ever worry about where's the creativity going to come from? I think that's working in television.
Do you mean where's it going to go? Yeah, that's more the worry, isn't it? I mean, yeah. I mean, the reason I do, my films are all different. I don't have one subject area. I tend to do lots of different things because I don't know.
I think that's also about working in the envelope of television, which I love.
Yes.
The envelope.
Yeah.
And trying to get something out of it that is different.
I mean, that is true. I mean, TV, it's much maligned television. I think what broadcasters really want is innovation. That's my line. It's easy to be cynical about television, but they want things that are new. I've learned that over the years. And sometimes it doesn't look like that when you watch the TV, does it? But in fact, if you really picture an idea that is different, that feels new, then you'll get a response.
Yeah, there are still some risk takers out there. And
I
that's
think
what
there's
it
a lot of
takes.
risk takers, yeah.
So look, thank you so much for coming along. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Herman. And thank you, Dawn. And a big round of applause, please.